Hi, I'm Patricia Fortini Brown, Professor Emerita of Art and Archaeology at Princeton University and a board member of Save Venice. I'd like to talk to you today about a tomb monument in the Church of the Frari in Venice that you may never have noticed. I hadn't either until I started working on a book about the marriage between Giulia Bembo, the daughter of a Venetian patrician, and Count Girolamo Deletori, whom you see here, whose family owned properties in the Friuli, most notably the feudal castle of Villalta and a city palace in nearby Udine. In the course of my research, I came across a guide to the city published in 1581 that cited a tomb of Alvise Della Torre, brother of Count Girolamo, in the Frari. Was it still there? I decided to investigate. So let's enter the church and move down the great vaulted nave past costly marble altars and monumental tombs. But instead of entering the portal in the marble choir screen that frames Titian's great Assumption of the Virgin in the apse, we turn right and then left and head up the south aisle. The 1581 notice states that the Deletory Tomb was located above the door through which one descends into the cloister. And we look up, and there it is, a rough wooden casket suspended high on the wall in front of a painted backdrop. There's nothing else like it in the church. The painting was difficult to make out from any angle, but I was lucky enough to gain access to a hidden staircase inside the choir screen and climbed to the top so that I could look across at it directly, and this is what I saw. A pavilion-type bed canopy with curtains pulled back by two winged putti to reveal a skull, which seemed to be dripping blood on the casket. The crown of the canopy was decorated with a narrative painting in grisaille, resembling an entombment of Christ, and no less than 5 coats of arms suspended from its rim. Now, what was this all about? This long-forgotten monument documents a tragic episode in a long-lasting blood feud, a vendetta, between the Deletori and the Savergnan, two of the most powerful families in the Friuli. Alvise's brother, Girolamo, whom we just saw, had attacked a Savergnan in Padua during Carnival in 1549 and was sentenced to 10 years of exile in Crete by an outraged Council of 10. When Abise came to see his brother sail off on a galley, he was murdered right on the Grand Canal, along with their brother-in-law and a priest from Udine. Although the assassin, Tristan Savergnan, escaped along with his henchmen, he was banished from all Venetian territories forevermore, and his palace in Udine was razed to the ground. And Girolamo Deletori's sentence of exile was postponed. Alvise's body was placed in this casket until it could be transported to Udine for burial in the family tomb. But it remained in the Frari, and the casket was mounted on the wall with its painted backdrop. And now it becomes clear that the grisaille painting on the crown of the canopy depicts not an entombment of Christ, but the grisly aftermath of the assassination. When the projects committee of Save Venice heard the story and viewed the tomb in 2012, the board put it on our sponsors list. Admittedly, it is not one of the artistic treasures of the Basilica, but it is a historical treasure. The scaffolding finally went up in the summer of 2018. The painting was not in great shape, as you can see. The boards were separating, the paint was flaking, and you could hardly make out the coat of arms on the upper left or the imagery on the right side of the grisaille painting. The first phase of the conservation treatment consisted of a careful examination. Abrasions and paint are clear in this close-up of the skull, and what looked like dripping blood can now be seen as a red pedestal. The panel was then examined with ultraviolet light. Here, the scan reveals that the drapery was once luxuriously patterned. This, alas, will remain lost in the mists of time. The next phase was the removal of grime and varnish. When the cleaning was completed, it looked worse than before. But then the conservators moved on to retouching. And fast forward, here's the final result of 3 months of work. Before and after. A somewhat fanciful 18th century drawing of the tomb suggests that the pedestal holding the skull was once an hourglass, and that the casket was embellished with a fitted cover, perhaps of velvet or leather, but the conservators left them as is. A textbook example of conservation versus restoration. To me, the most exciting revelation was the grisaille painting, which is now much clearer, and perhaps helps us with an attribution. On the left, 3 figures support a body. In the center, a hooded friar seems to be performing last rites above another body against a backdrop of at least four grieving women and perhaps 1 man. On the right side of the crown, another female figure looks back toward what appears to be the body of the 3rd victim, supported by 2 men. The similarities to the red monochrome frescoes of the Passion of Christ, attributed to the Dalmatian artist Andrea Schiavone in the Grimani Chapel of San Sebastiano, also restored by Venice, are striking. And even more striking when we look at Schiavone's preliminary drawings for a painting of the Lamentation of Christ dating to 1550. A closer look. I'm convinced, if not Schiavone, at least his workshop. What about the 5 coats of arms? All belonged to the Deletori family. On the left, the lion rampant, the arms of Valsassina, a feud granted to Abise and his brothers by the Emperor Charles V. The 3 arms in the center refer to the family's claimed descent from the royal Deletory family of France, the cross lilies, the tower with cross lilies, and this is the one most commonly used by Alvise's family, and the tower alone. And on the right, the black and white arms of Villalta, the family's feudal castle in the Friuli. A final comparison. Now, how do we account for the presence of this strange monument in the august confines of the Frari, one of the 2 pantheons of Venice, with burials of doges and the most distinguished characters in the city's history? I would argue that the tomb was a strategy to restore the good name of the Deletori, to elicit sympathy, and to inspire the Council of 10 to commute Count Girolamo's sentence of exile. The iconography of the grisaille painting suggests an attempt to create a secular martyr. What better way than to model the depiction on a Lamentation of Christ? But the canopy was a feature only seen in Venice on the tombs of doges. And this may not have gone over so well. Girolamo's appeal dragged on for nearly a year. During that time, he pursued a second strategy with his marriage to Giulia Bembo, whose father was, after all, an influential senator, but alas, not influential enough. And Girolamo was shipped off to Crete with his noble Venetian bride in the summer of 1550. Only in 1554 was he finally allowed to return to Venice to serve out the remainder of his sentence. Now, why is the forgotten tomb of Alvise Della Torre significant in the larger order of things? It is a piece of history, as well as a unique work of art that offers a precious window into a past in which deeply rooted feudal traditions clashed with the Republican values of Venice. You can learn more about that past from my forthcoming book, Bloodlines and Blood Feuds in Venice and its Empire, scheduled to come out in March 2021. Thank you for listening.